Not like this. I guess we're starting early because you guys have been waiting for so long. I'm sorry. We weren't sure we were starting at 6:30. We put it on the website 6:30, and then we were like, oh, well, people won't get here till 7, so then made it 7. Come on, be right here. I'm Julia Rothman.
I'm Jennifer Orkin.
And we organized a little panel of amazing surface designers to talk about this new and growing field. It's not new and growing, but it's new and growing in illustration, I think. I think illustrators are realizing that they can make a lot of money and do this amazing work and get all their drawings on products, and they never realized that before. So I think, I could be wrong, I realized it like maybe 10 years ago. You realized it how long ago?
6 maybe?
Yeah.
7?
And now look at us up on the stage. No, but I think that I teach at SVA, surface design as well, and it never existed before I started teaching it a few years ago. It was never in the illustration department. Maybe it was in a apparel department, I don't even know, but now I teach people, a lot of my students are here. One of my students on the stage, because she's a success, and she'll tell you about that. But, so I think that it's becoming, we're trying to do more here as a society to promote surface design as well. We just added it to the annual category for the exhibition. So right on the walls is the annual exhibition that happens every year in Society of Illustrators. So judges get together and people enter this competition to be in this exhibition and be in this beautiful book they put out every year. And this year, this is all the work that got in and downstairs, so you should check it out. But 2 years ago when I was chair, I made surface design part of a new category in the competition. So now you can enter your wallpaper, your fabric, your mugs, your
Puzzles and fabric.
so fabric. What else? Everything, anything. Blankets. Look on the wall back there. Phoebe Wall made a beautiful blanket. And what's the other thing? Like a what? Clothing. Okay. I thought it might have a more special name than clothing. Apparel. Beautiful apparel. Anyway, we are going to do more and more with surface design here in Society of Illustrators. One of my favorite people in the world is standing back there, Anel, who is the woman who runs this entire place. And if you've never been here before, welcome, because it's a very, very special place. It's a nonprofit, and it supports artists doing all kinds of things. They have all kinds of programs going on here. There's a sketch night upstairs that happens every Tuesday and Thursday, and people come and draw. I mean, that's one of the things. There's exhibitions. They have inner city kids come and do programs here, and Nell goes to prisons and helps people learn art. I mean, they're doing all kinds of things. So your $15 that you spent here is going towards all the things, wonderful things they are doing here. And I love this place, and I feel very close to it because when I was a student, I got a scholarship here, and it jump-started my whole career. So you should, I don't know, get involved too, and be a member or whatever you want.
They have amazing exhibits often, so it's worth it to come see.
Okay. Do you want to say anything else? I feel like I've stolen the microphone. That's what happens when I have one drink. Well, anyway, we have a panel here of some amazing people. They're just going to do it themselves. They're going to come up in 10 minutes, give their quick who I am, what I do, how I did it, and then after we're going to put the chairs up here and we're going to ask them as many questions we want about how much money do you make, and how did you get the jobs you got, and how do I do this cool career, because I'm guessing that's why you guys are all here. So that's what's going to happen. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, you did really well.
Okay, nothing else. So without further ado, we have Molly coming first. I told Molly the way I would introduce her is to say that I drink out of her cups every single day.
All right. I'm going to try to do a microphone and a clicker and a computer and all the things all at the same time. Let's start here. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm predominantly a tableware designer, but I'm also a fine artist, and I thought I would talk tonight a little bit about, I'm going to leave out my fine art career, and I'm going to throw that out there because you can ask me about my one-of-a-kind artwork if you want to when we're doing our panel, but when I was given the assignment to talk about my career and how it developed in surface design and illustration, I put together a presentation on that. So I just wanted to let you know that I have a sort of multifaceted career, also multifaceted in surface design and illustration. But I live in Massachusetts, and I'm here a lot. I have a lot of clients down here in the city, and I was really honored to be asked to join you today. So I'm just going to jump right in there since we only have 10 minutes. So thanks for having me. I'm totally honored. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share my experience with you about my career developing in surface design and illustration, because I'm predominantly a tableware designer, but my career started as a ceramic artist and studio potter, so this is coming from a slightly different perspective than normal, I guess, if that's possible. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to do my best. Usually I'm used to talking in about 40 minutes to a ceramic crowd, and you guys are not ceramic people. So if I say something that doesn't mean anything to you, just ask and then just save all your questions. So this is a talk I've never given before, and so I'm pretty honored to be in front of people who are recognizing me as a surface designer and illustrator too. So thanks, that feels pretty exciting. So my surface design and illustration work really began with my career as a studio potter, like I said. I was formally educated in fine arts with a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the School of the Museum of Fine Arts and Tufts University in Boston. They're now one school. At the time they were separate, but my degree was still from Tufts, way back in the 90s. And then I took 5 years and studied with a studio potter in Vermont and did my own thing between undergraduate and graduate school, and realized that I had all these other ideas, and I just didn't want to repeat myself all the time as a studio potter. And so I thought I was going to go be a professor. So I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, which is like one of the best ceramic programs, you know, as it is in Colorado. Some schools kind of randomly become really known for one thing or another. So I went out there, I got my degree in Colorado, and left school in 2008. Like the best economic time to go get a teaching job. And it was like 2 teaching jobs in the entire country were open for ceramics. And so I was like, well, I know how to be a studio potter, so I think I'm just going to go do that now that I have my degree. So I went back to what I was doing before I was in graduate school. And I sort of went back to all my old galleries. I was showing at like Greenwich House Pottery on Jones Street, which is, for those of you who are hobbyist ceramics, ceramic artists or folks who are dabbling in ceramics, or serious, it's a great place to be. And I showed all over the country, and I was doing okay. I was like making more pots than I could sell, and it was all right. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was, from an outward perspective, I was quite successful. So this is an example of the work that I was making at that time. So these are mugs that are hanging on some hooks, and this is about 2008, so sort of heavily decorated ceramic art pottery, essentially. So I'm going to jump ahead a couple of years to April of 2010, and I was still making pots full time. I had a baby at this point. My husband and I we're living in Western Massachusetts, and I got an email from one of the buyers in Anthropology with the women's clothing company, which is pictured here, at about the same time. This is their Rockefeller Center store at that time. And Patty Eisen, who was a buyer there at the time, special projects coordinator. It was like one of those like strange titles where you're like, I don't even really know what you do, but okay, I'll listen to you. And she was at Greenwich House Pottery, and she saw my work in the village and said, oh my gosh, this girl's work would be great for Anthropology. So I met with the buyers, and they asked me to design a tableware collection. They also offered to buy my pots from me and vend them. So they were like, we'll buy them wholesale and we'll sell them. And I was just like having this vision of making hundreds of mugs, and I knew that at that point I was like, wait a minute, like if I can't fill an order for someone like Anthropologie and I have to design it for them to reproduce, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because I can't, you know, if you can't meet that kind of demand, how are you ever going to make a living, right? And so I was interested in considering what it would be to mass produce what I was making in my studio. So Anthropologie was particularly taken by those mugs that I showed you in 2008. And they sent me off to design 5 mugs, so that's what you're seeing here. These are my first collaboration with them in 2010. And then a dinner service. And I was not a surface designer or illustrator. Like all my drawings that I'd ever done were on pots. Like I wasn't drawing on paper and then putting them on pottery. I was drawing on pottery. And I had to figure out how to make those drawings on paper so that they could mass produce them on pottery and have it still look like something that I would do. And it was this really intense process of like, okay, well, I'm using a calligraphy pen to draw on the ceramics, so how do I make that? So I started drawing with calligraphy pens and ink on paper, and kind of had to figure out this whole process because I assumed that they were never going to be able to hand make my pots in China the same way that I would make them in my studio because I was, you know, spending all this time by hand making them. But of course they did it, and of course they did not need my decals. They did an amazing job of replicating, because that's what China's sort of, our originality there is copy, or is here is copying there. So they value copying, and it's in the same way we value originality. And so if you're a really good copier, you have job security. So they did a great job copying my work, and ceramics are, you know, basically China is ceramics history, like in a nutshell. They are the like pinnacle of ceramic. So of course, if I can make it, they can make it. And it was really, you know, sort of a re-education for me based on my education in the ceramic community here about what was possible and not possible in the world of working with industry as a tool. So I've figured it out with Anthropologie this first round, and I had also already done the hard work of figuring out how to put what I was doing on ceramic on paper. Basically, that surprise led to me realizing that I needed to do more. Like I kind of had to hustle, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. So this is the dinner plate and salad plate here, also from my first collection with Anthropologie in 2010. And like I said, I came back to meet with Anthropologie in their home offices in Philadelphia to see the first round of samples. And I was expecting to see decals, which are printed, you know, from paper drawings, but they had done these slip inlay lines and hand-painted surfaces just like my handmade ceramics. And I had to really rethink things because looked exactly like what I was making by hand. And I was like, if I'm gonna be making these by hand and selling them for $200 a plate, how am I going to justify competing with myself in the one-of-a-kind market versus the mass-produced market? And so I realized I either had to differentiate my one-of-a-kind work, which I've done and now have a gallery exhibition career, which we can talk about later, and shift what I was doing as a studio potter into mass production and figure out how to like hustle Anthropologie to keep working with me forever. And we're still working together, so it's worked. It's happening. But it was definitely like a rethinking of what was possible. So then, once I realized that this was possible and that Anthropologie was interested, and everything from the start did really, really well, right? Like, so they were selling a ton of mugs. So I had their attention. They were making money off of me, and it was a good thing. And so we continued to work together. And like I said, we've been working together for like 9 years now with over 500 products that we've done together over that time period. And early on, I really started to see this relationship with Anthropologie to put all these ideas and designs I had for studio pottery into mass production. It meant that I could rethink what I was doing. So I wouldn't have necessarily like taken the time to make these bird cages by hand because they would have cost $2,000. But because I could reproduce them and sell them for $120 through Anthropologie mass producing them, it suddenly became this tool for me to make things that I couldn't have made or taken the time to make, because I would have had a hard time selling those objects unless collectors were interested in having them. And it just seemed like the right fit for me. And once that sort of clicked with me, and I realized that I could sort of make complex, crazy things, and anthropology was going to sell them, we were like off to the races, really. And I had a lot of ideas, and I think I was realizing also that I'm an idea person. In fact, my first fine art gallery that I worked with is predominantly a ceramic gallery, and I'll never forget her saying to me, you know, you're in a fertile period. And I was like, I think I just have a lot of ideas and I need to put them somewhere. And generally as a studio potter, you're about repeating yourself. You're making a line of something that you're going to provide for a customer to come back and replace the broken mug. And I was so sick of making those flower pots. Like, let me tell you, you guys, like I was like so ready to not have that. Like I was ready to make another one. I had another idea. And so licensing for me was like this liberating thing to be able to explore all the different ideas that I had. So again, this is sort of one of my favorite sets. That's a covered cake stand in the back there that I just absolutely love. And I was able to make, thanks to, like I just never would have taken the time to make that if I hadn't had the factory doing it for me. So really quickly, I had those decals, I had all those drawings that I was doing to make these surfaces for ceramics, and quickly the buyers and I started talking about other materials we could work on. I mean, anthropology kind of does everything, right? And they're manufacturing all of their own stuff. So we quickly started to think about juice glasses. This was the sort of second project that I did with them after the tableware. And since then we've done I think we've done like 24 or 25 juice glasses over the last 8 years. And the whale juice glass that I've done for them is still on shelves after that many years in anthropology, which is really amazing. And it was also sort of exciting for me because I was trained to think about objects and how what I draw and what I was putting on the surface of the object sort of engaged the object and the user of the object. And so one of the things that differentiated me was that I was thinking about the fact that all of my cups had a bottom and an inside and an outside and a back side or a clear side, right? So I was engaging, like in this case, you see my signature, I flipped it, so I inverted it so that when you finished drinking, you would see my signature instead of flipping it over and having to see it in reverse. And so playing with all the different experiences of an object, really, I was leaning on my ceramic training to understand all the objects that I was designing for as sculptural objects and your experience of all the sides of them. And the fact that I can make objects, oh, sorry, I flipped the, oh no, help. Oh, you're okay. Full screen?
I think it's has to play.
Okay, sorry, technical. But I think one of the things the other thing that I can do as a ceramic artist is hand them something to be replicated, right? So I'm not just drawing something and trying to make a printed wrap that goes around the object. I am literally making a one-to-one prototype in my studio and handing it to the factory to reproduce. So I can tell them exactly what I want, not in theory on paper, but in a physical object to have it be copied. So that's been incredibly successful for me because there's very little lost in translation, if you will. So again, another exciting material crossover, so ceramics and metal. Again, clocks are playing with this idea of drawing as object and object as drawing, which is something that I've thought about a lot in pretty much everything that I design. And I even sort of jumped into fabric and doing some other repeats, and that was the first time I'd ever done a repeat, like trying to make it work for fabric, and that was really exciting, and collaborating with furniture makers, and sort of, we did chairs, like you name it, in anthropology, I've probably designed it. One of my favorite things that I've ever done for them was this Fortune in a Teacup set, and this is sort of the pinnacle of that example of taking advantage of the industry as a tool for me, and sort of all aspects of surface design. So this is a game that I designed based off of the tradition of tassology, which is a long-standing tradition in ceramics where they would make these sort of collectible fortune-telling teacups, and you would read your fortune in the leaves based on sort of where it falls and the imagery and some of the things that go with it. So I created a deck of cards that gave you the symbology and its meaning plus how to use it, and it all came inside of this box that you could then store it in, right? Sort of the ultimate collaboration for me. So with everything you've seen so far has been stuff that I've done with anthropology over the past 9 years or so, and I've been lucky enough to use that sort of platform of learning. I used to joke about being at the School of Anthropology. I was telling someone earlier tonight, and I'm like about to graduate school. Like I had no idea how to be a surface designer until I had to figure it out for anthropology, and there was a lot of figuring it out. But then that meant that I could go and license my work elsewhere. So this is a collaboration with a company called Twig New York. That's a 6th generation old bone china company that's based out of Korea, but they started a division here. Tableware with a Jersey City company called Home Essentials. So this is all stoneware, and this is sort of an extension of what I've been doing at Anthropology and sort of a reintroduction of past designs, but expanding on them. So like Anthropology will often do like 4 mugs, but there could be a whole dinner service around that, and my customer has been really excited about that. So I've really developed a whole brand based on this platform that Anthropology gave me. Sort of my association with them was so strong that it strengthened our relationship for me to actually leave and go out and do some other relationships with other companies. So this is from a quilting fabric collection that I did for Andover. They're a New York-based company. So I've dabbled in some fabrics as well as some other textiles. So I've been working on rugs and pillows. This is with a company called Makers Collective and Peking Handicraft out of San Francisco. I work with Chasing Paper, which is a removable wallpaper company doing wallpaper. And I've had the fortune of working with a local letterpress company near me in Massachusetts called Big Wheel Press on a collection of letterpress cards. So basically I took a lot of the juice glass designs that I was having so much success with and sort of expanded on those as greeting cards, and it's been really successful for us too. And more recently I started working with a company called Hester & Cook. They're a Tennessee-based kitchen paper company. And so they make like table runners and placemats, and C.R. Gibson, which I made some paper plates and other paper goods for the table with, and sort of played again with this like object as drawing, drawing as object, and my tableware relationship. And this is another collaboration for Twig New York, so home decor items as well. And again, sort of it's a vase, but it's a drawing of a vase, but it's still a vase. Sort of playing with all that drawing that I like to do. And I'm just going to end quick. I know I'm probably over, but I'm trying not to be. I'm going to end with some of the book projects that I've been doing. So my illustration has made its, and surface has made its way into some books. So this is a small selection of books that I've worked on over the last 5 years or so. And I've published 10 books since 2014. And this is one of my most recent projects. This just came out last March. It's called A Bouquet in a Book. So again, I'm playing with this book as object and engaging the book and the experience of the book in its as much as I possibly can. So activating it as a pop-up. So when you get the book, it comes with the pages are all the pop-ups are turned down, and then as you read the book, the plants pop up, you turn them up, and you learn about the history of the plant and its symbology, or the flower, sort of playing with that history. So this book actually comes out on the 19th. So this is the next in my series. And that brings me to date with what I've been up to, and I look forward to hearing your questions afterwards, and thanks so much.
We sat in the wrong place.
You don't want to say anything?
I teach Dan in my class because I give like an assignment because he does a lot of remaking classic patterns into fresh modern takes. And so I give them an assignment, I show them all his work. I tell them that every time I see him.
Fresh modern takes.
Okay.
We'll tag you guys in this. Funderburgh, and I call myself a wallpaper designer and artist. Illustrator is also a completely fair and real name for what I do, but I don't know, I feel like any instance, especially here, there's a lot of overthinking and hemming and hawing about exactly what the labels are, and I don't know that anyone cares at all what I call myself or how it relates. But I do think about it a lot, and I feel like it really only matters in terms of like what career you're focused on, but I'm too easily distracted to focus on any single career. So this is me doing I guess what qualifies as fine art, which is, I say, do some percentage of wallpaper design, and I do some commercial illustration, and I do some fine art. But the fine art is mostly just a token thing that I tell myself to feel better. But it doesn't pay a lot. This is a mural in this new building in the Brooklyn Navy Yards. It's called Dock 72. It's a giant behemoth of a building that looks kind of like the Titanic. It's crashed in there, but it's got some murals, one by me. This is an example of a wallpaper I made. I had a whole spiel, but now I'm kind of thrown off. So yeah, this is a wallpaper I made. I initially made it for WeWork, but they didn't pay enough to have it be exclusively there, so I just kind of took out their name and made it one for sale. I work with a company called Flavor Paper, and they're a wallpaper printing house. And I ran across them almost randomly. They found my work in a book, because I was drawing wallpapers before I made actual wallpapers. But they are a fantastic partner because they print my stuff. They do screen printing, and they take my designs and they make a burn screen, and they hand print it, and it looks fantastic. And so I can say that I make hand screen wallpapers, even though I don't actually do the screening myself. I take credit for it and pretend I have the skill. They're much better. It's like you have to be really careful when you're screen printing wallpaper, because if you're off just a little bit, then it kind of like descends. If you try and put up on a wall and they're not exactly even, like looks like you're sloping off into oblivion. This has got a bunch of office supplies. Clearly used some Baroque clip art, and I've drawn my own clip art to go into it. And so it's probably a 50-50 mix. And me trying to emulate the kind of that style, which is not super easy. Getting better at it, but it's people that were actually etching things in the 18th and 19th century. They just had a lot more time. That's what I tell myself. It's super hard to get those lines all parallel and engraved. This is an example of my commercial work. In fact, the best example, because normally it's not so cool, the things that I make. Everyone has a slideshow and wants to show the good parts, but I feel like this is maybe the apex. These are designed by Charlotte Strick, who does really cool book designs, and she told me about this idea of a series of reissued Christopher Isherwoods, and each one of them had a pattern. I was like, yes, I'll absolutely do that. But these are amazing to read, and I feel like they make a cool set. But I was really happy with how it turned out. Most of the time, I'm not super pleased with the commercial work, and so I try and gloss it over. But I realize you guys are partially, at least, students or people that are working in the industry, and so I can tell you, I feel like I don't need to try and impress you with only showing you the fancy art stuff. This is an installation in Mexico City. It was just temporary. It was cut vinyl, and I guess I'm not sure why I included it here. So I guess to show one of my main interests is the clashing of different patterns. I'm a super fan of ornament and all sorts of decorative arts, I guess, the general umbrella term. And I guess this also qualifies as surface design, but you can see all the different patterns that are on the hubcaps, which are then on the greater pattern, which is the wrought iron fence. There's also some symbolism, probably. This is the slide I meant to show. This is This is a part of a book called The Grammar of Ornament, which you might or might not be familiar with is like this fantastic catalog made in the 19th century by Owen Jones, who was just trying to make like an encyclopedia of decorative styles. And so for your home or whatnot, your architecture firm, you're like, okay, so this is what Greek styles look like. You can choose one of these. This is your Baroque. This is your Middle Ages. This is your Byzantine. This is savage tribes. They weren't super politically up on terms back then, but it's fantastic for what it was. It's just like an amazing collection. It tries to like be the Wikipedia of every pattern and motif, but it's also, for me, inspirational in the sense that they're all jammed together. I like the juxtaposition of putting disparate, Persian next to Greek, next to Chinese things all together, and I feel like that's the strength of, I don't know, I feel like there's so much more to be mined from that. So that's what I try and steal from as much as I can. Some more fine art. So I'm not showing you the commercially relevant stuff. This is marbled paper, which is, I guess, a form of decorative art, not necessarily surface design. This is a wallpaper I made. It's a toile. It's it was for an exhibition, but then Flavor Paper continued to print it. It's very specific. I'm not sure why people would want to have this in their house. It's for Chinatown, and there's like you can see the Kumyangan, the Chinese sausage truck there, and then like the street, which is like grand, but these are all very specific things that are like one block, all from a place that would play soccer. And so it was for my soccer club. We made a clubhouse. That's what it was for. This other pattern. This is a hyper vigilant floral. Make you feel safe. This is one of the best clients I've had is the White Hotel, which is in Williamsburg, which was a very cool place, like maybe 8 years ago. I don't know when. You may have read about it. The White used to be it was a lot of things. This building that is now a hotel was a fabric company, and then textiles. At first, I guess they were a cooperage, which, as everyone knows, is a place that makes barrels. So these are barrel making tools built into this floral damask pattern, and I guess you like use these things to scrape the kind of your slats and get them to put into barrel shape. But that's the one that turned out best out of the 3 wallpapers I made for them, which I think is still there. But now I never stay there because I live there. Whenever my friends' parents come in town and then they stay there, they tell me that it's nice. This, you can see that it's actual wallpaper, it's not just digital stuff. They really do a fantastic job of screen printing it at Flavor Paper. And I guess here's a small bit of pragmatic advice, is that they don't turn anyone away. If you want to print things there, if you have a client that's interested in wallpaper, you can talk to them and they'll either screen print it for a certain price or digitally print it for if you need like a smaller roll, and they're happy to license other people's work. And I get quarterly checks from Flavor Paper from the ones that they sell, and it's always nice, even if it's not a whole lot. This is another pattern I did for them. I realize now I'm getting old because there's so many things. There's like the iPod, like with the earbuds, and this is a parking meter, which they don't have those, but when I drew it, they did. They were around New York City, and it's a monument to me aging. There's also pigeons and rats in there. They're cute ones, though, so you don't need to be bugged out. This qualifies as surface design. This is a snaky pattern I made for Hugo Marie. They were selling these nice silk scarves, and it's like, selected because it feels very posh and makes me feel like a fancy dude. But I like how it turned out also. With that last one, you can also see if you practice Adobe Illustrator, you might recognize that patterns go in a few different ways. You can go like the X and Y as a wallpaper, or you can go along a line, a linear pattern, which is the snakes here. And then the third pattern would be the radial ones, where you kind of just repeat it different angles. These are some laser cut tools that, for no real good reason, but they're inspired by Islamic architecture and the motifs. I've spray painted them and then I used the laser cutter to burn off the out pattern. This is another example of the patterns within patterns and also clashing patterns. And so if I were to remember, I could point out different things and be like, so that's, North African, and that is, medieval, and that is, we have some kind of Aztec-y type patterns, and that's obviously, Islamic or Moorish. But I basically rip off everyone and to try and keep it about even, so no one is extra mad at me. This is a piece that I made for the MTA, and it's a permanent installation up in the Bronx, and it's an exploding supernova rose window of plant spores, and I've got really good reasons for all those things. It's a kind of I don't know, sometimes when you're pitching a project for a public art, they like to have a good narrative, and while I'm really happy with how it looks, I was mostly impressed with myself for having like a really good reason for all of it. So I think that oftentimes people like things that are pretty and patterned and ornamental and centered, but like especially if they're when it's going to be permanent, it's going to cost a lot of money. We'd like to hear really good reasons for it. I don't need to tell you the whole spiel, but it involves Edgar Allan Poe and the Bronx Botanical Gardens, New York Botanical Gardens, which you should go see. It's also, they're exploding out. The piece is called Eureka. There's actually 4 different rose windows. These are sketches for a piece that was here. It's no longer here. It was.
Well, this is the first show. So.
Oh, the first show. Okay. This is a. Does it count as surface?
Sure.
Illustrations. There's a poster for the subway, and these are different early versions for this one. Which, if you write a train with a number on it, then you might see it. And this is also laser cut cardboard. It's been spray painted, and it's inspired by Maurice Sendak's In the Night Kitchen, which is a fantastic kids book, just for kids. You can see again like the mismatched patterns, or I don't know, it's a mismatched term. That's it. This is that's all I have.
He's great to work with. He makes fabric.
Yeah. Okay. Hi there, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer and Julia, for inviting me here tonight. It's an honor to be here. My name is Mickey Krueger. I'm the president of Windham Fabrics. I am not an illustrator or a surface designer, but I know a lot of them. So Windham Fabrics is a what is known as a fabric converter. We print fabric with designs on it, predominantly for what is the craft industry or the home sewing industry. We sell fabric to fabric stores, or more specifically, quilt shops. Our customers are retailers, and their customers are crafters, they're sewers, they're makers. So, who we work with? We work with a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. We work with quilt historians because we do a lot of reproduction fabrics, and we'll use 19th century or 18th century document fabrics and reproduce them. We work with designers all over the world. We're based in Jersey City, New Jersey, but we work with anyone who has an interesting idea, no matter where they are. We do have an in-house design studio where we employ a number of artists that work on their own to create designs for us, as well as working with individual artists and illustrators that we license. We work with illustrators and artists. We work with illustrators and artists, and they're also our inspiration. So that's why you see that on both sides. And we also work with commercial design studios, companies that just work with illustrators like you. We see thousands and thousands of illustrations from designers, and we just buy them outright from commercial design studios. Where do we get our inspiration? We get our inspiration from everywhere. Home textiles, architecture, archival documents. Those are the 19th century fabrics that I talked about. Scrapbooks. We get inspiration from fashion, apparel design. We get inspiration from our customers and our customers' customers. What are people doing with our fabric? What end use do we see? It inspires us. And again, we are inspired by you guys by looking at your work constantly through things like Instagram. Instagram's kind of weird, right? It's kind of voyeurish, but we're always looking, and it's a great tool to use. We get a lot of information and see a lot of different things that we wouldn't ordinarily see through mediums like Instagram. So this is kind of what happens to our fabric. Fabric is kind of weird, right? For us, it's an end product, right? We make fabric, we print fabric, and we ship it on these bolts to fabric stores. But for the customer that's walking through the aisles of a fabric store, our fabric is their raw material. They're going to now make something from it, and it's an important thing to think about from the perspective of an illustrator or a designer. So yeah, I'm creating this design that I know is going to go on fabric. What is someone going to do with it afterwards? And that's a topic that we think about from the beginning of the design process all the way through the end. But that's what we ship our fabric, and there it is on the shelves of a fabric store. Again, that's our primary customer. But like I say, fabric is weird. It finds its way into many different things. It's a raw material, particularly for garment manufacturers, and just some examples of what some garment manufacturers do with our fabric. So this is an example of a collection. A collection you see down at the bottom is 15 or 20 different surface designs that all are related. They all kind of have rules for our industry, loose rules. We like to see small, medium, and large designs. We like to see light, medium, and dark designs. And there's a reason for that. So in this case, we bought a piece of artwork, that map on the left. And from that map, we pulled out different elements, reworked them, resized them, recolored them, so that we have a collection that all works together. And it works together in a way that makes that quilt on the right. So again, when we talk about the design process, and I'll say this over and over again probably, we're saying, okay, here's these 15 designs. Do they all make sense to work together to create that quilt on the right? So we're thinking about that from the time we start the design process until we end it. And here's another collection that we did in-house. So it's not always many patterns going into a collection. In this case, cork fabric was becoming popular. So there was actually cork being laminated to fabric. And the craft community kind of grabbed a hold of that, and they said, wow, this is really cool. And it caught fire. And we said, okay, well, we're doing cork. We're actually producing that cork fabric. But wouldn't it be cool to have something that looked like cork, this real cork fabric, but instead on the kind of fabric that our customers are used to? So we created cork, what looked like cork, and we printed it on fabric, and of course we called it uncorked. But here, apart from, different than what you saw just in the slide before, we did one pattern in many colors. But again, we're all, and you can see that these presentations that we show to our customers, like this is an example of our sales presentation. It's paper. We're not showing our customer fabric, but I promise you every time it does become fabric. But again, we're thinking about what we're going to do with that fabric, because our customers, that's what our customers will ask. This is beautiful fabric, what should I do with it? We're thinking, oh, well, you can make that quilt. This is an example of a collaboration that we have with Williamsburg, or Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. Obviously, they're all about the history of colonial America. They have an unbelievable archive of period fabrics that we have the good fortune of going down and looking through their archives and coming up with fabrics that we think will resonate with our customers. And in the case of the blue toile on the right, we've just taken that document fabric. You can see it's a little yellowed on the bottom, and we kind of liven it up in colors that will resonate more with our customers. On the left is an example of the same thing. We took that document fabric, we got all the yellow out of it, and made it into a color way that we think will be more appealing to our customers. Here again is an example of a document fabric that we reproduced. Oftentimes when we reproduce these document fabrics, you know, they're old and crusty and yellowed, and they're printed. In this case, it was block printed, so we redrew all those images to create cleaner artwork that our customers again would appreciate. And it looks something like that. And again, on the bottom right, you'll see the sales card that we use to present this collection to our customers. But those are all authentic reproduction fabrics, and then coordinates that we drew out of them. And the quilt that resulted in the collection. So one of our licensed designers is Heather Ross. We printed her fabric collection on cotton lawn, and this is what it is. Heather kind of breaks the rules that we kind of suggest to our designers. She doesn't give us small, medium, and large. She doesn't give us light, medium, and dark. She just gives us what she thinks is really cool. She's in the fortunate place of being able to do that because she's got a really good following in our industry, so people kind of collect her fabric. They buy it no matter what, which gives, you know, it's a nice thing to say that, you know, whatever it is that you want to do, Heather, we'll do it because it always sells. Not many people are in that position. But she's got a great fan base. They're almost groupies. But we still need to show our customers suggest to them what they'll do with this fabric. And again, the quilts, those are quilts designed by Denise Schmidt using Heather's fabric. Those little squares on the left are what we call strike-offs. Design will eventually go to the factory to be reproduced on fabric, and we get these little strike-offs that are like test fabrics that we use to make sure that the design looks right, the colors look right, everything looks cool. Then we approve it, and it goes to mass production. This is another designer that we work with. Her name is Maria Carluccio. And this is an example of working with an illustrator. Maria's a great illustrator, and another good example of Instagram. So we'll kind of troll through her Instagram because she keeps posting new work, and we'll say, this looks cool, and we'll send her off on that direction. In this case, we saw something that she called rainbows and rain. And so she gives us these main pieces and then works with our design director to complete a collection. So we saw some of these things like the people on the left, and we saw the rainbow parachute and the sun and the rain. And we said, oh, that's really cool. And then we said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we took out the umbrellas that the people are holding and made that a design of its own? And so they'll become main designs and blender designs. You can see how that raindrop or the rainfall will become a nice blender if we do that, sort of like a no-print print, sort of like a print that only suggests color instead of design. And again, this is a back and forth that we'll have with Maria, as we do with many of our designers. It's a give and take. We're suggesting things that we think will resonate with our customer. She's working with us to give us that, but there's always a give and take. There's always a pushback. We'll listen to her. We like to think that she'll listen to us as well. This is a collection that Maria did previously. So we saw that little cat design in the library, and it just exploded into this collection called Smarty Cats. And you can see again where we've got like a main design, secondary designs, and blender designs. You can see where there's a little mouse on the right with his little orange ear. And we said, oh, that's just the most adorable little mouse. Why don't we make him into a design of his own? And there he is. There he is on the sample card. But again, it did become fabric, and we did suggest to our customers what they should do with that fabric, which is make that little library quilt. Carrie Bloomston is another design that we work with, and we work with her in a completely different way than Heather or Maria. Thank you. So Heather is this wonderful artist, and she dreams about her designs, and they become these collages that she sends us in this form, with all sorts of notes and guidance for us to follow, a color palette that some of it she's painted, some of it she's found, some of it she found in paint chips in Home Depot. She's given us parts of drawings, and we work with Carrie to explode these ideas into all over designs, complete with repeats that Carrie doesn't do for us. We do for Carrie. So this is an example of one of Carrie's last collections called Paint. She gave us this just basic setting when it came to paint, and we took that and created a collection with small, medium, and large, light, medium, and dark, all the elements that we know our customers are looking for to create wonderful quilt projects with the fabric collection. So this is working with an artist as opposed to a surface designer or illustrator in a new kind of way. So this is work that we've seen from Grant Hafner, again from trolling Instagram. And Grant does these paintings that are these wonderful, just super colorful landscapes. You can see the bottom one is a kind of one of his complete paintings. It's a road with telephone poles, but it's always got this incredible sky. It's dawn, it's night, it's daytime, it's clouds, it's weather, but the consistency is this lateral line work in all of his skies. And we said, well, wouldn't it be cool to take those skies and create a fabric design out of it that, again, that we create it in a way that we know our customers will be able to use. Again, right, we're providing them with this raw material that they're going to make something out of. But what's different about this is, Grant works in, every one of those paintings is about 1 million colors, who knows? So we decided that we would kind of chop off the street part of it and get rid of the telephone poles and just focus on the sky, the line work of the sky. And in order to do that, it takes a lot of work on our part that Grant is giving us the license to manipulate his designs. He says, yeah, go for it. And that's a collaboration that we'll go back and forth with him. We'll say, Grant, this is what we came up with. What do you think? And he'll say, that's great. keep going, or that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen and I hate it, now stop. We hope he won't say that. But he's really enthusiastic about it. But the interesting thing about working with grants designs, and you'll hear more and more about this, is we're going to print it digitally. So that means, we could have taken those designs with 1 million colors in it, color reduced it, and printed it conventionally with 20 colors, and we would get something cool, but we'll get something much cooler and authentic to his original art if we digitally print it. Curio is the newest collection from Betsy Olmsted. She's another designer that we work with. Betsy is this wonderful watercolor artist. So many of designers and designs that we work with often come from painted art that then gets digitized and manipulated digitally. So Betsy always starts the process off and actually continues the process with watercolor designs. And what that means for her as an artist working with us is, as we go through that process of taking that rabbit design and blowing it out into the collection, that you could see the collection there in the rolls of fabric, is again a lot of back and forth. But what it means for Betsy is constantly doing new paintings and modifying paintings and doing paintings in colorways, which is a lot of work compared to someone that might be doing it in Photoshop or Illustrator. So you could see what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we work with a lot of different artists, surface designers, illustrators in many different ways, and we're not afraid to work with you in those many different ways. And we hope that if you look at the collaboration from the other direction, that as a designer you wouldn't be afraid to work with us in the same way. And that's it. Thank you.
Of course. Jamilla, you're up. Come. This sweatshirt is designed by her, by the way. And this skirt. And these earrings.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamilla Okubo. I am a mixed media artist, surface pattern designer, and illustrator from Washington, D.C. And I graduated from Parsons School of Design in 2016. And I majored in integrated design, which was a self-disciplined, interdisciplinary program where you had to choose a focus, and your options were fashion design, service design, urban, and sustainability design. So I chose fashion, and when I applied to Parsons, I applied for fine arts, but then after freshman year, we had to take foundation courses, and I was introduced to all these other, I guess, mediums or like potential majors, and I really fell in love with fashion design and surface pattern design. So one of the first classes that I would consider like my introduction to surface pattern design was this class called Pattern and Symmetry. So we basically learned about like color theory, the basics of using like Illustrator and Photoshop and how to arrange patterns digitally, and then all of our assignments they had to be turned in hand painted. So if we made patterns on Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, we then had to paint these designs on paper with gouache. So these are some of the patterns some of the first patterns I ever designed when I took this class. So we had like a few different assignments where like we had to go to the Met Museum and look at some of the different arts. Like we looked at Islamic art. So this was one of the patterns that I created inspired by like the ceramics and tiles that I saw at the museum. And then I took a class called Photoshop CAD. So this was when I was introduced to using specifically Photoshop and turning artwork into patterns. We also learned how to scan fabrics and then recreate patterns based on that. So this is one of my assignments, well, part of my assignment that I created, where we had to take a brand that we liked and create a collection of patterns for them. So there you see my color palette, and then the original fabrics that I turned into patterns, and then these are the patterns that were turned into repeats. And then I also took a fashion digital portfolio class where I basically learned the same thing. So when I was at Parsons, we didn't really have, there was a fashion design program, but there wasn't like a department for surface pattern design. So I took as many classes related to surface pattern design that I could. So I took textiles and a lot of digital pattern design classes. So this was another assignment where I had to create a collection of patterns inspired by a brand. So I chose Del Pozo. I really am fascinated with their like whimsical style and bright colors and sculptural designs. And now on to projects. So back to my major, integrated design. My focus was fashion, but I took a lot of construction classes and pattern design classes, but shortly after taking some of my studio courses, like this assignment was for a class called Integrated Design Love. So basically we had to create a project, work on a project that was something catered to what we loved or was really interested in, and I started to realize that I wanted to go back to like my fine arts roots. So I started working towards exploring my cultural identity. My mom's from North Carolina and my dad is half Kenyan and Trinidadian, but I didn't grow up with my father. So using art and pattern design was a way for me to explore and learn about my culture. And there's this fabric that's really popular in East Africa called Conga fabrics. So normally the design of the fabric has a border, a thick border, and then a center motif with either a pattern design or just one like placement object or illustration, and then usually at the bottom it has like a proverb or a saying or a song lyric. So what I did was take that as a platform and create my own Conga fabrics. So these are 3 of them, and I was basically talking about different things that I was interested in my culture. So the one on the left is called We the People of the African Diaspora, and it was just talking about celebrating Black culture. The one in the middle is called Sister the Alphabet is an Abolitionist, and that's just about the importance of education in the Black community. And then the third one is called When There's a Will, There's a Way, and that was inspired by my grandmother who grew up in the South, and she would always tell me about stories about just her as a kid picking cotton and like our family members being sharecroppers. So this was the beginning of me exploring surface pattern design, but really I was intrigued by different cultures using pattern design as a way to tell stories and communicate ideas. So then I created these illustrations and I collaged the patterns that I designed and created different colorways and collaged them onto these illustrations. And then I took this course called Fashion Illustration and Performance, which was another core class, and we basically had to somehow combine those 3 subjects, I guess. So fashion, illustration, performance. So the illustration portion of this project, I took all of the patterns that I designed in my previous classes and printed them out on paper and then created these like abstract collages of like bodies. And the fashion portion of the project, I had to create those illustrations as garments and figure out how to bring that to life. So these were the 2 looks that I created, and that's actually me in those bodysuits. So I collaborated with a photographer to take the photos, and the performance part of the project was me in the garments and that large headpiece that I like stuffed with cotton and suffocated myself with somehow. And the performance part was just me moving in the garments and just exploring what that felt like. And this was a part of my thesis that I did. And I went back to using Conga fabrics. I'm just really obsessed with Conga fabrics, and the fact that in East Africa, like a lot of the fabrics usually are used as like gifts, or like people will like give them to someone else to like relay a message. Like some of them are really shady, but then some of them are like religious. For example, someone might give a conga to her friend and be like, oh, your husband wouldn't be cheating on you if you cooked for him, you know, like things like that. So I was just like, I really love the way they communicate through these fabrics and like how they use them. And I was like, what messages do I want to convey in my work? So for these, I decided to focus on honoring the Black women in my life who raised me. So I created congas inspired by my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mom. And I paired quotes that I felt resonated with them the best. So the one on the far left, I wish I had created zoomed-in photos, but they are on my website. The first one to the left is, sorry, I can't even see. So the best way to predict the future is to create it, and I feel like my mom is very much, she lives by that quote. So the one in the middle is of my grandmother, nothing can dim the light that shines from within. And the third one is I'm deliberate and afraid of nothing. And I would just listen to stories from my grandmother that she would tell me about my great-grandmother, and she just didn't take shit from anyone. So I felt that I was just, yeah, so that was that. Fast forward to graduating. It was a rocky point in my life, specifically because integrated design, we didn't really have one focus. Like a lot of people who were in my major, we were all dabbling in different fields, and some people were like into product design and fashion design. And so I was like, okay, what do I want to be? Do I want to be a fine artist, an illustrator, surface pattern designer? And even though I took like a bunch of fashion design courses and as many courses around surface pattern design, I felt like I didn't have a strong enough portfolio for some reason. I don't know why. So I ended up not applying to any like jobs, even though I did like an internship at Suno, New York, and I was helping them with their pattern designs. So I ended up I was lucky enough to get a children's book gig. So that was like the first kind of illustration work that I had done. So I started like illustrating children's books. So after that, I got another children's book illustration project, and I just kept taking on projects that came my way. So I did packaging design for this natural hair extension company called Big Hair No Care by Freddie Harrell, and she had found me on Instagram. I also was following her because I just thought she was really awesome. So these were like the pattern designs that I made for her packaging, and then I redesigned her logo. Then I did a collaboration with one of my friends who graduated from FIT in fashion design, and she took one of my illustrations and turned them into a pattern. So yeah, also I forgot to mention, while I was in school, I was working part-time, and I took as many illustration gigs on the side as possible. So like one of the first illustration gigs that I took, I created an illustration for this French underwear company, And I was like, oh, I think now I'm an illustrator, but I didn't really know what that entailed. So eventually I just added that title to who I am as an artist. Then in 2017, I got an email from an art consultant group that was working with luxury brands, and this brand happened to be Christian Dior. So they reached out to me via email, and they were like, hey, we're doing this artist collaboration for the second time in a row, and if you're interested, let us know. So I was like, is this real? I was really like scared. I thought it was a scam. I was just like, because I received emails where people were like, we want to buy your art, just send us some files or whatever and we'll send you the money. I'm like, how does this work? So it was a very long process. We worked together probably for an entire summer, and the process in itself was kind of sketchy. I hope they don't see this. They basically were like, all right, so now that you're interested, send us some designs and we'll let you know if the design teams like them. I'm like, okay, so where's the contract? How do I protect my work? And they're like, that's if we like your work, so then let us know. I was like, okay. So then I sent them my designs and I like put my watermark over the designs like in big bold letters. They're like, we actually can't do anything with this, so can you send that to us without your watermark? I was like, okay. So I sent it to them, and like a few weeks later, or about a month later, they said, okay, like, can you send us the official files? And I was really hesitant, and I was giving them a hard time, so they're like, all right, how about we meet you in New York? And we met at a hotel, and they had like samples of my designs, and I was like, all right, this is real. I had like a friend wait for me outside, just in case I don't come out. Like, I'm in this hotel, so, you know. So, but the meeting went well. I met the VP of Communications, Olivier Villalobos. He's really great. Their team is really awesome. So after that, like, first meeting point, I was like, okay, this is real. I can breathe now. So this is one of the bags that I designed. So they basically we met in person. They took like the pattern designs that I made, and they brought a bunch of samples of like fabrics and like different treatments like beading and sequins. They're like, all right, so what do you want to do with this? Like, I basically had all creative freedom to do whatever I want with their Lady Dior bags. So I was like, okay, what do I want to say on this kind of platform? And I was like, I want to pay homage to artisans from Kenya, and I was really in love with like Maasai beadwork. So I wanted to create something that kind of replicated that. So all of my bags were made with beaded designs. So these are the 3 bags. I was really also inspired by, at the time, I'm always listening to different music. So whatever I'm listening to, that kind of influences what I create. And at the time I was listening to a lot of Sun Ra, and I was learning about Afrofuturism, so I kind of wanted to give that aesthetic with some of my bags. And then I also worked with the team, and they were like giving me different materials that I could use that kind of look similar to what Maasai crafts women or artisans were using, like raffia and like different materials. So I kind of did that on the floral part of the bags. And then I also, like I said before, I've been illustrating children's books. This was the 2nd book that I had illustrated, and this woman, she's an independent publisher based in Rome, Italy, and she had reached out to me when I was in school, but I declined because I just couldn't take on the workload. So shortly after Dior, she reached out to me again and was like, hey, are you still interested in working with me? And I was like, yes, let's do this. So this book is a book of African proverbs. So this again was like another way for me to like explore using pattern design to like tell stories. So the one on the left is eat when the food is ready, speak when the time is right. So I kind of created a pattern inspired by Conga fabrics and like made it as like a skirt for the mom who's like, you better eat your food. And then the one to the right, show me your friend and I'll show you your character. And this is another children's book I illustrated called Inzimoto. I really had fun with these because I was just excited to design the patterns for like the illustrations, because basically my process is I paint everything. I have not gotten to creating illustrations digitally yet. I just really enjoy painting as my process. And then I normally collage the pattern designs by fabric onto the paintings. So these are some of the illustrations from the book. And then my most recent collaboration was with this Australian clothing and homeware brand called Gorman. I actually just came back from Australia 2 weeks ago, and I was there for a week. But they reached out to me via social media as well. The owner, I always ask clients where they find my work, and they told me that they were looking up like black art, disco art, and the work from my We the People series with the silhouettes, that came up when they found my work. So the process with this collaboration, they basically went through all of my work on Instagram, Tumblr, my website, and sent me the illustrations that they really liked. And they were like, hey, we really like these illustrations. Do you have the files for them? So after that, I worked closely with the design team to come up with pattern designs for the collection. And this is the end result of some of the garments from the collaboration. So they took a lot of my illustrations and turned them into repeats. And yeah, this is one of the skirts. Thank you for coming.
Okay, Keiko, my former student. So proud of her. Hi, my name is Keiko. I'm an illustrator, surface designer, but I kind of do a lot of things. I also do gallery work. So I'm originally from Jakarta, Indonesia. I moved here maybe 6 years ago for college. I graduated from the School of Visual Arts. I majored in illustration. I currently work as a part-time freelancer. I also work as a studio assistant, among other things. And I make my own products for wholesale, and I also do craft fairs where I sell my work. So this is the work that I did at school, and these are my paintings. They're weird. And yeah, some of my Riso prints, collage work, my illustration. It's based off a dream where I hit someone with my scooter, and he was bleeding, and I was like, oh my god, don't deport me out of the country. And yeah, so why did I want to do surface design? So I think subconsciously, when I was small, my dad always gave me presents because he's Japanese, so he'd travel back and forth from Japan to Indonesia, and he'd give me like really nice presents from Japan, and it's usually like simple things like handkerchief, like greeting cards, and they're all so beautifully made. It's filled with like patterns, and I've never seen something like that before, so I was amazed. And so I don't know surface design was a thing until I took Julia's class in my junior year. I didn't know I wanted to be a surface designer. But it's great. I love doing patterns and just putting my art on products. And I think why I wanted to do surface design is because original art in general is very expensive. Like I wouldn't sell my painting for $5, but I would sell like a sticker pack for $5 with my art. And why I think it's positive, it makes my art more accessible to people, and also it allows more people to own something that I made. And yeah, the product is useful. It's not just pretty to look at, which is great. And these are some of the patterns I made while I was at SVA. So this one is like alien socks, flying saucer. I just assume aliens wear socks. I don't know. Then the pattern, a silly brown pattern. It's just everything orange, yellow, and brown. Dancing fruits. And yes, a happy grid. So how I make pattern is really, I think, general. I set a theme which is either very specific, like I want fruits, dancing, or like big, I guess I'll do something along the theme of grid. I don't know what's going to be on it. And then I sketch the illustration by hand and finalize it. It's not like super neat or anything, it's just drawings. And then select a color palette, scan, draw the sketches digitally, and decide on the type of repeat. The repeat that I like doing is like toss pattern, where it's like all over the place. And I just make the pattern until I'm satisfied with it. Basically, it's a trial and error kind of thing. And this is the works that I do now after I graduated. So the types of jobs that I get is a lot of commissions from individuals for paintings, and like packaging for like food. I don't know why. But yeah, this one is a takeaway box for meatball back in Indonesia. And then, yeah, they decided like giving food is a better present than like flowers, which is like true. And then like a pattern for this dessert shop back in Indonesia. So this is the packaging for the bottles. It's just the same pattern, different colorways for the background. And yes, I do a lot of craft fairs where I sell my work. This is I think the first craft fair, not really craft fair, it's just like market I did at School of Visual Arts. So you can see the work that I have is mostly something I made myself, like Riso prints. The only thing I got outsourced are like the stickers. And then this is a Renegade Craft Fair. I have more variety of things. Still, the tote bags, I still screen them myself just because I don't have the budget to make it, because I just got out of school. And I got silk scarves made, still the same prints, stickers. So I got like these clays made by myself for jewelries. And then after market, I started having more products, and this is my the latest market. It was in November, not December. And as you can see, I have more line of products that I made outsourced, like tote bags, keychains, enamel pin, silk scarves, postcards, and so on. That's because I don't have the time to make every single product myself. It's easier to get it made elsewhere. It saves time, but it also saves cost than just making it yourself. And so craft fair, I've met a lot of people who went to a craft fair. They want to do it, but they don't know, like, oh, I don't know, I'm not like confident enough to do it. And I always like tell them it's a good experience. You have to, if you're considering of doing it, do it once and see how it goes. But you have to be smart about it. The good part is you earn money from it, hopefully. And it's a good exposure. You get to share your work with people who you might not be able to share your work with. It's a good way to learn about the market and see what people buy. Meeting new people, and it may lead to other opportunities, because I've gotten several jobs, like commissions for like painting for a hotel and so on through doing craft fair. The bad thing is it costs money to pay a booth. And it's difficult to set up if you're like just by myself, set this up for like 3 hours. It's really tiring, but it's definitely worth trying. This is my latest collection of surface design. It was originally made because one of my friends, she works as like someone in the duty free in JFK, and she wants me to sell some of my work. But then I can't just sell like smiley faces. It has to cater with what people buy at JFK, which is New York products. And that project is still ongoing because it takes forever for the JFK to approve you being there physically selling your stuff, because they just don't want people there. And then, yeah, so I started making like New York themed stuff, like the hot dog, and New York Star, Big Apple, like look how surprised the banana is because the apple is so big. And yeah, I made pattern for the packaging of my silk scarf lines. Pattern that I made into other products. Another pattern, this is like actually a pattern of the silk scarf I made. Woo. And yeah, the good thing about making your product is you can make whatever you want. No one is telling you, that's not a great idea, but it's also bad because sometimes it's not that great of an idea. And it costs a lot of money and is risky. And you really do have to do your own research on like where to make them, how to get it shipped here, the factory, and like making sure it arrives on time if you have clients who want to buy your stuff. And yeah, the product may not end up selling very well too, so it's kind of like you don't know what's gonna happen. And so how I decide to make my product is since I do craft fair, I go to a lot of them and I walk around and see what other people make. And I also go to gift shops to see like what are they selling and what sells well and what I want to buy. If I want to buy it, then I want to make it. And yeah, I ask friends or people around me what they would buy for themselves or as gifts. And yeah, I know a lot of people who do it on social media, like make a poll, like which one do you prefer? Like what kind of product should I make next? Which isn't always accurate because like they want it, but they don't always want to buy it. But it's a good way to like see what people are into. And since it costs a lot of money to get the product made, you can also like make a pre-order. You can order a sample of one, and then if let's say 50 people wants to buy it, then you have the budget to make like 100 and see how it goes. And yeah, I think the most important part on deciding what to make is to see the cost of production, to estimate the price. Because if it costs like $100 to make something and people would not want to spend like $150 on it, why would you can't make it, you can't make profit out of it, so you don't want to make it, sadly. And how picking the right artwork for a product is also important, because just because your pattern is nice doesn't mean it fits on everything. So what you can do is you can use elements from your pattern instead of using the pattern itself. Because some people would want to wear this pattern as a legging, but I know a lot of people who don't because it's too crazy. So picking the right artwork for the right product is very important. And intricate small designs may not translate very well on some materials. But you'll only be able to learn that through trial and error, or ask the supplier to send you the stuff they've made before. So these are some of the stuff that I got made, like sticker packs, hat, keychains, pins, magnets, tote bags, this scarf, and yeah, I got a lot of questions in terms of how do I find people to make my like products. Like, I find them online. Like, I don't know, because I used to also work before this as an assistant for someone, and she was prepping for the National Stationery Show. So my job was to find people to make her stuff with, which is great because that's what I want to do for a living. And after like trial and error, I found that like the best place to find factories is Alibaba. They're like, all the factories are in China, but they speak English very well. You can check their rating, their reviews, and you can even check how much money they've made on Alibaba. And then yeah, contacting the factories directly will save you money, because I know when I was searching for places to make my product with. There's a lot of American company who do your product, but they're not based in America. Like the factories in China, they're just the middleman. But they claim, oh, it's like we're making it in America, so you have to do your research. Like why would I pay extra if it's gonna be made at the same place? And it's a safe method of payment. That's like, you don't wanna be scammed. Yeah, make sure to order samples first, because you wanna make sure that this is the end product that you want. Maybe not every single time you make a product, because that could cost you some money. But the first time you were making, let's say, silk scarf with them, you wanna have one sent to you and like, oh, it's like they're doing a really good job, and then afterward maybe picture is sufficient. But yeah, requesting for photos every step of the way to avoid miscommunication is very important. You can also send them photo or like the actual product as reference on how you want your final product to look like. And wholesale, because I don't do licensing. I don't know how to do licensing. I only do wholesale. I don't license myself. I only know how to like put my final product in stores. So I only know how to do wholesale. So I'm still like figuring it out, because I've only like done wholesale for like a year professionally. And yeah, thing that you need to do is make a spreadsheet, because you want to make sure you're earning money and not losing money. And to see the cost of production and how much to price your product. Like while I was working as an assistant and helping my friend out for the National Stationery Show, she was reading this like Bible of wholesale, and it says the profit needs to be at least 70% of how much it costs to make the product. That's wholesale. That's like the minimum. Of course, it depends, but I think the best way to decide how much you want to price your product is by looking at other artists. They have, a lot of them have their wholesale catalog online on issue.com, so you can like learn, oh, they are pricing it this much, so I should price it maybe around the same margin. And making a catalog is very important, because your client want to see what stuff you have. And you can do this online, or you can do this by making just like an InDesign file. I just do it by an InDesign file. And most shops that I've researched so far, maybe 70% of them have a submission page for new products. You can send them your catalog online. Or you can mail them a physical booklet catalog if that's what you want. And important lessons that I've learned in the past 2 years of my professional so-called career is to keep on creating work, whether it's pattern or just drawing, or like even if it's just sketches, not like final illustration, because you don't know, like your art is reusable again and again and again. Like the stuff that I made in school, because I like it and people seem to like it, I still use it until now, and it's been 3 years. And if you're not satisfied with the stuff you make, like don't stress out. That usually happens because you know the idea is so good, but the execution isn't. So just take a break, move on, and like do other work. And you can always come back to it to finish it later, which I do all the time. And yeah, practice making patterns often will help you build an eye in making a seamless pattern. Even if it's just like squiggles and then you learn how to place things, that's really helpful, because I can make 3 patterns in a day, like this detailed, because the one that takes a lot of time for me is the characters itself. The pattern does not, but that happens because I keep on doing pattern and like, oh, like it looks good here, and I know it looks good there, and that's it. And yeah, don't throw away or delete your work, because you don't know, it might be treasure, it might be like a really great idea, and you can use it in 10 years. You never know. And that's all. Thank you.
How are you guys doing? That was a lot. Everybody was supposed to go 10 minutes, but they were so great, they went way over. No, you're okay. They were all very wonderful. Thank you guys so much. I'm sure you have a ton of questions, or you might. If you want to go get a drink and relax, this is like casual time, but we're going to move the chairs up here, and you guys can ask as many questions as you want. So, let us do that while they relax for a second, and let's move the chairs here.
ISUU.com. ISUU. Oh, thank you. I would never remember. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask her.
Yeah, no. To turn these on, you just press the button. Take them out. Okay, who wants to go first? Go ahead.
So you don't reuse same patterns, or can you talk a little bit more detail how you sort of keep them separate but together?
Sure. So if you want to reference or see a visual, you can look at I have a sort of separated out the two parts of my career by two different websites, but also two different Instagram feeds. So it's Molly Hatch is my Instagram feed for my design work, and Molly Hatch Studio will quickly bring up what we're talking about with the fine art work. So when I was working with a gallery that was a predominantly ceramic fine art gallery that was taking me to the fine art markets, so Park Ave Armory shows and sort of mid-tier shows in Miami during Basel, and that was happening at the same time as my work was developing with anthropology. So for me, what was happening is that I really loved the consumability of the designs that I was doing in studio pottery, except that I was charging $120 for those mugs that you saw that I first showed, and that didn't really feel consumable. I felt like a collectible, and the same person who was going to spend $10,000 on a fine art object was going to be using $120 mugs, unless they were like someone in the ceramic world who understood the value of those objects. And so for me, it felt really liberating and democratic to be able to take some of the same concepts that I was working on in those fine art objects and one-of-a-kind objects and studio art pottery, essentially, and make them more available, like at a $16 price point in anthropology. And now, my work is sold at Marshall's and Home Goods and Target and all those places for even less, which is really exciting because it's the same factories that anthropology uses. And now I'm really finding out the real price of the work and how much they mark it up, just between us. And then I am able to really service that community of collectors and make that, so now my fine art objects, to be crass and talk about money, are selling somewhere between $20,000 and $150,000. And I can still sort of exercise a much more conceptual thinking, and it's paintings on plates that hang on the wall and exercise a lot of the same concepts that I'm using in my design work for anthropology and other companies, but in a much more, it takes 2 months to make one of those objects instead of, 5 hours or something. So I think separating them for the sake of the community who's buying them is helpful, but they actually are constantly marketed together. My design work is talked about to the fine art collectors, and people understand that both of those things happen. So while they're separated for lack of confusion for people who are finding me online, it's not because of some hierarchy of perceived value or anything like that. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. So do you kind of simplify what you would do for your fine arts market versus, because you said something that'll take sort of 5 minutes versus?
Not really. So I think it would be good for you to look at it. Just go ahead and look at it for sake of everyone who doesn't necessarily know. But basically, I'll do I'm making plates as a group of plates that hang on a wall that make a larger painting. And I'm making paintings of my objects into paintings and drawings in design as well. So I'm playing with the same concepts, but executing them in slightly different ways. But also always sourcing history for inspiration. So you'll see the relationship when you look at them.
And one is one of a kind, and one is mass versus the one of a kind is still like really way more valuable. It's the same kind of. I think it looks like your work. Like they both look very much like your work. Why did you say you graduated from anthropology? Are you not working with them anymore?
No, I was I would say that I'm about to graduate. I still haven't graduated. I'm still working on it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that meant you moved on.
No, but I think what I was referencing is that
you're doing more.
I'm so jealous of your students because they're like, and then I took this class and I took that. Or you guys are talking about the things, and I was like, oh god, if someone had told me how to use Photoshop for repeats, I had to like literally Skillshare my way through figuring out repeats. Like, I did not know how to make patterns, or and so, anthropology is like, let's do pajamas, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea how to do repeat patterns. So I had to like go home and be like looking it up online to figure it out. So, I mean, yeah, right.
You guys are lucky out there.
The risk though is worth taking because then you go back but then they would tell me to change a color and I'd be like, oh my god, I have to redraw them. Because I didn't know how to replace a color. So like over the last 9 years of working with them, I figured all of that out, and working with other companies who have helped me, and they're amazing. So yeah, I mean, I think school of
I never show
anthropology.
that Illustrator tool to my students that just does it for you because I want them to learn the hard way.
I still don't even use
paper
Illustrator, so.
You Googled it?
I googled how to do that. Because she make us do like cut the paper into 4, place it beside each other.
Your brain understands it.
Yeah, it was helpful, but I just
Or
googled
else
like, how
you're
to make
just
patterns.
using a tool. You need to learn the concept.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Yeah.
Yeah, so for all of you guys, I'm sorry. Thank you. For all of you guys, great work, everybody, by the way. I just want to know sort of the whole myth of licensing, and I mean, Jamilla, your experience as well of a big brand coming out to you and being like, so just send send your files, or or don't worry about a contract. I mean, I've had experiences like that as well, where they're like, well, yeah, no, don't worry about the contract. Well, we're friends, so I'm trying to email everything, so I'm like, I have a sort of paper trail. So there seems to be like this mystery for me. So about licensing and copyright. I mean, I know general thing. I'd love to hear a couple of experiences or advice that anybody would have at all.
I definitely recommend buying the book. I think it's called Graphic Guild.
Graphic artists.
Yeah, that
guide.
book.
Graphic artists.
Yeah,
Guild.
graphic artists. I have it in my Amazon.
Ethical guidelines
Yes.
manual.
Yes,
It comes out every year.
they have like.
They don't have stuff about surface design in there though.
No, they
really.
do. It's
No,
like
they do?
maybe like 5-6 pages.
Okay.
They have like template like mock-ups of like contracts for you to write. For example, like if someone wants to license your pattern designs and like how many, or if they want a collection, like I'm not sure what edition that I bought, but I mean, like you said, they just came out with a newer one, so surface pattern design should be in the latest one. But that helped me a lot with like when Gorman reached out to me, I just referred back to the book to see if what the book was saying kind of matched up with what they were saying in the contract, and like ownership rights with like the files and the artwork, and what I can do with the artwork afterwards, or all of that jazz.
I will say, like, the best way I've found of knowing like what to charge or how to do something is to know your peers and ask them for advice. Like, I am always calling, I'll ask Jennifer, like, oh, did you do a licensing deal, or are you doing this with them, or what do you think the licensing rate should be for that? Or if I'm getting like a big ad job, I'm like, oh, what should I charge for this thing? Like, Melinda just called me and said, like, what would you charge for this? What should I charge for this mural? Like, what would you, I mean, that's, I think, the best way to do it. But, I mean, be your own advocate. I think she did the right thing by being scared and, trying to make sure it was the right thing so many times through email, making sure it was your
Yeah.
You have to be your advocate, and people will try to get what they can. And, I mean, meeting in New York, like, they wanted her, so they're going to do that kind of thing. So, I mean,
was not
then they learn the next time not to do that to another artist.
Let's hope so.
Theory. Do you have any? No?
Can I ask, at what point did they give you
first check.
Still waiting.
No, thank God, but you know. Well, let's see. After they made the physical prototype of the bag is when I got the contract. So it was just, to me, a sketchy process in total because they're like a huge brand. You know, I didn't sign a contract yet. They could have been like, oh, what artist? Who's that? And made, you know, bags with my designs on them and not said a word about the collaboration, you know? Like, but I got paid, I think, the first half was probably after we said yes to the designs. Like the final, we agreed on what designs, because initially I was only supposed to design one bag, but then we had made so many different prototypes and they were like, well, actually, Jamilla, we love all of them. I'm like, me too. So we ended up doing all three, which is really great. But definitely, like, do not be scared to be that, like, annoying, like, person asking all the questions, asking the same questions, emailing them and, like, forwarding and, like, you know, copying, pasting what they said on this date. Like, you really have to fight for yourself, especially if you're not represented by anyone. I don't have an agent right now, and people have been reaching out to me with big projects, and I kind of have to advocate for myself, and I'm learning throughout the process, like, as I go. For example, like, I did a project, the French underwear company, like, they came to me for a specific type of artwork. They were like, we want a disco diva, Afrocentric work. And then as I started to make the work, they were like, actually, we want to make her have wavy hair and put feathers in her hair. I'm like, that sounds like a Native American, and that's not what I do. And I kind of ran into this conflict where I was like, I don't feel right finishing this artwork for you all, and I just went with it, and they ended up having another illustrator finish the artwork, but I still got paid what they were going to pay me, so you really have to advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to do that.
So I could add something to that. So most companies that you're doing licensing work with, they're expecting you to ask these questions. So don't be afraid to ask them. If you're new at it, they might take advantage of like dragging it out as they did with you, but eventually they know they have to get to this, so don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Ask friends questions that have done it before because they're expecting it.
Sometimes your friends are wrong though.
But if you're not sure, it's a place to start.
Yeah. Ask a few different friends.
Yeah, pretty much.
I was thinking, because when I signed the contract with Flavor Paper to license my work, then I had a friend who I won't name who was like, fuck up, dude, they're taking advantage of you, man. Like look how big their place is, and they only give you like 5% of the profits of them. I'm like, damn, you're right, I'm getting screwed. But then they've been paying me every quarter now for like 10 years, and it's so much more than I would have gotten if I just like asked for a flat out fee. Right. So it was a good move in retrospect, but I had doubts, and I did ask my friends, but you know, sometimes you just have to gamble, I guess. But that thing with the not giving you a contract is messed up. I'm mad about that.
I just want to do this, Jamilla. Did you ever outright discuss with Dior how uncomfortable you were with their process? I mean, are they aware of the fact that their whole process was pretty sketchy? Or are they going to go ahead and do that with the next
I did
movie that
not discuss that with them because I was scared, but I still was like, but you're not going to get me.
I mean, now that you've done
yeah, I mean,
with them.
so the thing is, they had a middleman. So that person or the group that they worked with, that was who I was in contact with. Then once, I guess, the designs were approved by the design team, that's when I started talking to them. So maybe I should have spoken with the, I guess, art consultant group who puts together brand collaborations about that, but I didn't.
I just wanted to point out that I really love that each one of the artists here is very true to their own sense of what their artwork is and what they want to be creating, as opposed to just following trends and saying, oh, this is what that company wants, and I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do what I want. And I think that's so important, and it makes it,
Yeah,
it's
written
yeah.
for everyone.
I think also to speak to a little bit, I think you were asking a little bit about how it comes about, the licensing. I mean, am I correct in asking? Yeah. And I think that, I think it's interesting to hear that each of us have had sort of a different experience with how I also got cold called and had do I wait 2 days before I respond because Anthropology is like my dream company. And I was like, how do they even know who I am? But I think that happens more often than not. But, in every company, I feel like, Anthropology doesn't work the same way as anyone else. I get a phone call once a week from somebody about, I'm working with Anthropology and this seems weird. And I think I had to work with them to help them understand how artists work at one point. And they actually started an artist collaboration department because of that conversation that I had with them. So it can be really valuable to go back and help them understand in the context of helping them have better experiences with people in the future, because they don't even know what experiences are being turned away because they don't trust that it's the right approach, if that makes sense. But I would say that, even in talking to Jennifer recently for an online series that I taught about her experience with developing her career outside of working commercially, developing your own independent career, just putting your work on Instagram or putting it out there is a way for people to see. I was just making pots because I needed to make a living, and they were in galleries, and a buyer walked by. People are seeing your work at craft fairs. People are seeing your work on Instagram. And when I recently interviewed Julie Gwynn, who's the head of artist collaborations at Anthropology now in the department that they created after I asked them to, she said, we don't care if you have 1 million followers on Instagram. We often find people that way. And if you have 4 followers, that you're just putting your artwork out there and you have no idea who's actually watching. And I would just say that, this is an amazing place to do that, being a part of a community and sharing your work if you want it to be shared is probably the best way to get exposure. There is no right way or wrong way or way to get it out there, but if you're not putting it out there, then no one's gonna find it. So doing your best to just put it out there, I would say. I have an agent, and I know Jennifer also has an agent, and my agent I sought out when I was starting to hit some situations where I felt like I was not trained in illustration or design, and I didn't know if there were standards. I knew there were certain things that were right and wrong, and I knew I needed a contract, like a boilerplate maybe, so that every time I got approached by a company that wasn't Anthropology, I would have to figure out how to I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was normal. Can I license this same artwork for a mug that I on bedding? I don't know. And what are some of the standards in each? Because every sort of categoric part of licensing has sort of a different industry standard for how to work with people and what they're comfortable with. And so having an agent for me has been incredibly helpful in being strategic, and also having a buffer. So I can be like, hey, you can tell them that's weird and awkward, and I don't have to. It's like, me, you do that. It's like a good cop, bad cop moment. They can also make connections. There's a huge range, as you know, but for me it's 35%. Yeah.
That is a lot.
Right, but a gallery is 50 to 60%.
Right. But that's
right.
Different kind of.
Sort of.
A totally different.
as far as an agent goes, because I have one as well, and she takes 35%, but she asks for much more money than I would ask for, and she gets me jobs that I would never find myself. So it balances out.
I also they manage all of my sub-licensing internationally, so they manage all of my international licensing. So they work with agents in UK and Europe and Asia, Japan, Korea, and Australia, New Zealand. So I don't have to deal with any of the collecting of money internationally or filing the paperwork, so I'm not getting double taxed and all of those things. So there's a lot that they do for me, and we can go into what that buys you, and it's a lot that I don't have to manage. I get to sit at home and make my work instead.
Managing it yourself is a job in itself.
Yes, exactly.
Mickey, do you work with people who have agents?
We work with, we work with licensing agents, and we work with designers directly, and we've worked with designers that had agents, dropped their agents, and went back to agents.
Do you prefer to work with the artist directly or with the agent?
It doesn't matter to me. but you know, one thing I'll add to this conversation is that every industry is different. Every company within an industry is different. I mean, we have a way of working with artists that I know are different than some of the people, other fabric companies that are in the industry. You know, we have a standard contract that we generally use for all designers that I like to think is simple and easy to understand.
So simple. It's very great. I
It's
just showed it
straightforward.
today in class. People who like to.
My contract?
Yeah, because it just says territory and use.
Yeah.
There's like 3 things on it
Well,
that we fill out. It's
yeah, well,
great.
when we think of licensing, there's, you know, we try to be fair. And really what we're doing, you know, and again, I can only speak for myself and my company, but we're just borrowing your designs. We're borrowing your designs for a specific, we're renting it for a specific use, for a specific territory, sometimes for a specific time period. One of the most important things in our agreement that we have with designers is that you as the artist own the designs. They're yours, we're borrowing them, we're renting them. If you want to use them on plates or sheets or pillowcases or apparel, fine. We're just borrowing for our specific use. But it doesn't work that way for every company, and there are companies out there that aren't necessarily looking to take advantage of you, but given the opportunity, they might.
Also say that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you don't have an agent, like for me, what I have been doing is looking for like creative artist agencies or lawyers. There's like an creative artist lawyer group in DC that help creatives with contracts and like negotiating prices. So that's always an alternative if you're just starting and you don't have an agent.
Even if you're not just starting, there's a nonprofit here in New York that will help you negotiate your contracts for free. And even if, so I could even use them even though I'm a Massachusetts resident because my gallery is here in New York and they're selling in New York. So just for those of you who don't.
What is the nonprofit?
Oh God, it's look up nonprofit, you know, artist legal help in New York, and I think it'll come up immediately. I'd have to. I haven't actually used them because I do have an intellectual property lawyer that I use for my needs. But I was going to say that the luxury market is actually like a totally different thing as well, and you can probably speak more to that. But I think generally speaking, royalties are a higher percentage, closer to 10% of everything that's sold at the wholesale price, rather than 3 to 5% or 7%. I mean, I've had everything from 3 to 10%, and I'm sure other people can talk to that. But I know that because you're selling less but more expensive items, that it's typically a higher percentage.
Is it volunteer lawyers for the arts?
That sounds right.
Okay, new question. Back there.
Mick, you talked about finding a lot of artists on. You talked about finding a lot of artists on social media, and we know that it's a bottomless pit. So, what do you look for? How do you wade through that? Any tips?
A glass of wine.
There is a lot of information out there. I like Instagram the best because the question that I always ask a designer once we start working with them or at the very beginning is show me the most complete, how can I see the most complete representation of your body of work? I want to see everything because if I see everything, we'll go in this direction or that direction to start. Instagram's the easiest way to do that. You know, it is a bottomless pit, and there's no way for me as a consumer of design to see everything. Anthropology is your dream company. Go for it. You know, contact them directly. I have worked with designers who have cold called me, and I've said yes not because they cold called me, but I like what they saw. I like what I saw. We gave it a shot. So if there's a company out there that you think you'd be a good fit with, or that you're particularly interested, you like their aesthetic, cold call them, find the right person to speak with, and shoot them an email.
I don't know what you guys do, but I like to think of like my Instagram as like a magazine of my life. Like if you were flipping through a magazine, like what is this like curated version of me as an artist? So like the photos have to be bright enough. They're not like dark and ugly. They show a little bit of my personality once in a while, like what I'm doing, but nothing like too personal. Sometimes it's sketches because people want to see process. You do a lot of like
those videos of
from above,
painting with time-lapse.
Time-lapse videos, and people say like love those because they get to see the process. I think probably all that stuff. I mean, you think it's like
It's
easy,
job.
but it's like a whole job to make your Instagram this like thing that people want to look at, and it's. You're constantly thinking about like, is this good to Instagram? What about this? How about that?
But it's
take
important because if you're using Instagram for that purpose, if it's the tool that you want to say this is what I do and this is how good I do it, your Instagram has to be professional.
I mean, and it is what everybody's looking at. It's not. It's where I get most of my jobs now.
I have a question. Will someone else do that
yes,
for me?
Dan.
You said it's like a job. It is a job. I don't have time for that. Will someone else do it?
Yeah, well, if you're getting enough work, then don't worry about doing it. But if you are looking for jobs, then you have time to do that.
I have enough work. I don't have enough likes.
Oh. I'll press like more often. I'm so sorry. I haven't done it for a while. Everybody go to Dan's page, follow him, and like every single picture. Go through every picture and like it, so then he feels validated.
That's like an easy 100 right there.
Yeah, that's right. You have 100 new followers.
I'm sort of serious though. Is there someone that like me?
Yeah, you can pay an intern to be your Instagrammer, but you're not gonna want to do like they're gonna then.
Is it PR marketing?
Yeah. I mean, there are companies like that. You know, all these companies now hire me to like post on Instagram. So like $1,000 to like post their drink on like do a sketch of their drink and like post it. Or I did it. Yeah, I do it. I did a thing for Brookfield Place where I went and walked around and like painted different sections of it and put it on Instagram, and I made a lot of money from that. It was like
that's very cool.
Do you not do that?
Artist influencers.
I'm surprised because you have way more followers than me.
But I don't think like.
Anyway,
whatever.
Next question. We could go down a rabbit hole of Instagram things.
There you go. Yes. Oh, thank you. I don't know which other people went to grad school, but I know Molly, you had mentioned it, and just wondering if that made any difference for you as an artist, prepared you any better for the future that you got. Is it worth it to go to grad school as a fine artist?
I think that's a little bit of a hard question to answer. For me, absolutely, because I had recognized that I wasn't in the right, like I knew I liked making pots, but I didn't like repeating myself, and I was exhausted working 40 hours a week throwing pottery full-time as a production potter, and I was like, okay, this doesn't seem fully engaged, I'm a little bored, like spending a little bit too much time in the evenings drinking, maybe. Like, it was like post-undergrad 5 years, and I was trying to figure things out, and working full-time as a potter taught me a lot, and it technically made me more proficient, but I really realized that I had a lot of ideas. And it felt like maybe being a professor, which was sort of the only other alternative in my mind, and that like I was like, it would be nice to be a fine artist and sell my artwork through a gallery. That would be dreamy. But you know, let's face reality here. It's probably more realistic for me to be a professor. So that's why, and I was starting to like not bump up against like wanting opportunities that required me to have a master's degree. And so I went and got my master's, and I think what the difference was for me between undergraduate school at the museum school in Boston, which was a purely fine art school focused on making you a studio artist. They didn't have a major, they didn't have attendance, they didn't have, like you could show up once, you had a review board once a semester, and you'd show up and put all your artwork up for the semester, and you would sit with 4 faculty and 2 students and go over it and pass or fail. And there would be people who would come in, and they paid like $18,000 a year then, which is a lot of money, to come and like get a degree and show up once a semester and like paint in their studio the whole time. It was like shocking. But what that did was it meant that you only showed up if you wanted to, and it meant that I left with this real drive to make work. But the formality of a more university situation where it was like, you know, very, very theory driven. I studied an intense amount of art history. It was like having a minor in art history in graduate school. It's a 3-year program, and it's a terminal degree. I mean, we do have doctorates in fine arts in this country, but you can go be a professor after having your master's, so unless you're going to be an art historian, I don't know why you would pursue that. And so you're pushed in that time as a fine artist getting your master's degree to do almost both doctorate and master's degree work, because you're not just writing a thesis, you're writing a thesis and executing the work to support that and defending it in front of a committee. And it's super intense, and it's a really immersive time. And if you're in a good program, then you're really it's going to project you into the next level of thinking about your work. And so for me, what it did was it gave me this theoretical context and understanding of where I fit into the big art world picture, and design too. Although they told me I couldn't, on my defense, they told me I couldn't make plates and put them in a museum and have them at the clay studio at the same time. And I was like, well, why me? And then I sent them all a postcard when I had my first major museum installation. I was like, how do you like them apples? Just saying. But, you know, I think that it basically what it does is it forces you to really assert how you fit into the world and what you're doing that's independent from everyone else. And that's not for everybody, necessarily.
So many questions.
Rena.
Yes, I have a question. So when you were just starting out, what ways did you have that you created for yourself when you had to kind of deal with the inconsistencies of your income coming in? For any of you that want to answer that question.
How income was inconsistent. Like you never knew whether you're going to get paid. Do you want to
Like, what did you have to fall back on? If your income is inconsistent, you have to pay rent, your projects come and go.
I can say that, you know me, but I do so many different things at once. So if you're working on surface design and there's a lag, like you're not getting in work, you're working on a proposal for a book. And if you're not working on a proposal for a book, you're trying to get editorial jobs. And I think everybody up here does something else besides surface design. I don't know, maybe not Dan. I guess fine art. Fine art.
I mean, illustration for all sorts of stuff.
And illustration. But it feels like everybody's dabbling their hand in all different things. So if you're not doing...
So in other words, you always have something going on, some project that will
You try. Yeah.
I had an amazing husband. He's a builder, but you know, we shared pooled resources. He hasn't worked in 5 years. I've been the breadwinner for the last 5 years, which has been amazing. So he's been with my daughter. But I would say that, you know, multiple income streams is a huge thing. But I was a professor at RISD. I was adjunct at a local community college. I was hustling like crazy all over the place, selling work in galleries, still licensing, writing books, and you know, didn't sleep basically. Just as many different places as you could put yourself out as possible.
Thank you.
I mean, Keiko, what do you think? I mean,
Yeah, well, what I do is, because I'm just starting my career, it's kind of hard to have steady like income in terms of clients keep on coming in for more work, because I don't have enough like client works, so they don't know what to expect. So I do other jobs. I try to make it art related. So like I said earlier, I work as a studio assistant, and for the past 2 weeks I've been like working at an art fair at Park Avenue Armory. So it's a sacrifice, because if you can't just be a superstar overnight and like make tons of money. It takes process, and I feel like it's the same for everyone here. They have to start somewhere and keep on making artwork on the side while you do that. Because for me it was like it's impossible just to do client work, because I don't have like 10 clients a month.
Yeah, I'll second that. Like when I got contacted by Dior, I was working part-time in retail and I was illustrating a children's book. So when Dior came out, I was like, well, it's time for me to go. But I'm also a studio assistant for an artist, an older artist. He's like 77. And I handle his social media for him, and I help him in the studio. Yeah, and then his neighbor, who also has a studio, was like, hey, can you do my social media? Because I don't want to do it. And I'm like, sure. So it's like kind of trying to figure out how to balance that, because for me, I'm still figuring it out, and I don't know when my next project will come sometimes. So.
I meant to say something.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Jump in. I always forget the most important, only practical bit of advice is that from college I got a job working in a clothing company. They're a hip hop clothing company in the early 2000s called Echo Unlimited. And it's kind of embarrassing, and so that's why I kind of gloss over it.
Oh, the rhino?
Yeah, the rhino on it.
Yeah.
They might have been, I don't know, it's so long ago, it's kind of, I don't know. But as a place to work, it was amazing because it was basically grad school for me, because that's where I learned Photoshop and Illustrator and how to make patterns and how to do tech packs for production on apparel and then advertising and photo shoots. I kind of did everything. I made the website, like I kind of basically covered all the bases and gave me every one of the connections that I'm still kind of using today. It's like everyone that was there that was allowed to leave because they weren't like in a visa situation. They all left as soon as they could, and then they all worked at different companies, and that network is invaluable. And I still, hang out with them and hit them up. And so I think that like even if you have dreams of being a famous surface designer, then working in house someplace, if you think of it as like a paid internship, I don't even know. This is a very different time. I'm not sure if anyone's hiring at all, but if you can, I recommend it. Sorry.
Yeah, you just get stuck in the jobs, I think. Like people go in jobs and they never leave. I think that's the scary thing.
Yeah, definitely time to graduate.
I have a question, because I've been away from the market for a while, and I'm thinking of coming back, but I'm not sure what is the best way, because some of your stories seems like, they were by chance, that, you got really lucky and you got a really good gig, and that led to something else. So far, I feel like Instagram is something that I really have to get into. But I was thinking, I've been looking at, I'm redoing my website. I have licensed in the past, and I've done a little bit of everything. But I really had to step away from the market, and I want to come back.
I can talk to that for a little bit, because I had a different career as a textile designer for many, many years. And then I really couldn't stand the industry anymore, so I backed out, and I was doing not so much. I was doing a little freelance here and there, and once I decided I wanted to get back into it, I started taking a lot of classes. I started working all the time, just doing my own personal work, my sketchbook. And it's just, you have to put in a ton of time and a ton of work and a ton of research and a ton of classes and figure out where you want to be. And it doesn't happen, even though it looks like it happens overnight on Instagram, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time.
I think that self-assignment of like 30 minutes a day and posting that on Instagram was such a genius way of like assigning herself this consistent presence both with making but also with posting, and people were like, your following is insane.
Right.
Because everyone wants to see what you've been doing.
But I don't know if you all know, but I have a sketchbook that I started 6 years ago, and I just do it every day. Mostly now, maybe not quite as much, but I do it pretty much every day. But when I first started, I had my friends following me. So, but that's 6 years ago. So after about 3 years, I added up how many hours 30 minutes a day was for 3 years, and it was a lot. So, you have to put a lot of time.
10,000 hours.
But those,
and you keep going, because there's always something to learn, and you want to change, and
did those sketchbooks become other work anyway that you
Yeah,
had
I mean,
used and made money off as well, so you can.
That happened, but I didn't know that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
So.
But you drew from that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I follow you on Instagram, Jennifer, and I would say that the amount of stuff that you posted had a big impact on me. I mean, I took note of that. And again, as a consumer of what you guys do, you know, it's one thing to get the eyeballs on your Instagram feed. It's another thing to have people make note of it. And again, the volume that you did and the you know, how good it was. Certainly, I took note of it. So you know, we're talking about Instagram, right? It's important to have a good breadth of work of your work on Instagram. But how do you get followers? I mean, how do you get people to take note?
It's a really big question because there's so many people out there and so many people doing daily work. And
what about Facebook? Do you guys use Facebook anymore?
I keep hearing about LinkedIn, like with Instagram, you're marketing to your peers. Isn't that no?
No, LinkedIn is more for like people who don't do art, like econ or like investment banker who want to show
I thought
off.
it was for somebody like an art director or fabric company.
Yeah, LinkedIn is really good for other kinds of connections, but again, at some point, even after you make that connection, you know, no one has time to call you and get together for drinks or whatever. They just want to see the body of your work, and Instagram is the place to do it. It's just very easy.
Well, I can reiterate from talking with art directors and other people I've interviewed for online business of class that I taught recently. Again, I'm gonna revisit that, but to say that like it doesn't matter if you have followers or not. Really doesn't matter. You're just putting it out there.
Matter. I don't understand. I mean, publishers go and they say like, you want to make this book? We check your Instagram and see how many followers you have, or else like if you don't have a following, we're not going to make this book. And people are hiring people from them having followers because they want you to then wear the clothes that they're promoting or the thing that you made for them. So you can't say having no followers does not
I think
matter.
that's a certain kind of like because I've heard also that the concern is that Instagram followers aren't necessarily real followers and that it's actually more important that you have a mailing list. I mean, I feel like I hear something new every day, like about all of that.
And like in like a year, Instagram won't be the medium like that people use. It will be something else. But right now, it feels like the currency of like what is valued, I think.
I had Tumblr before Instagram, and so all of my followers, or like dedicated followers from Tumblr, moved onto my Instagram once I moved onto Instagram. But like a lot of my clients who reached out to me were like, "Oh yeah, I saw your work on Tumblr," and just
but I found you through Gorman.
Yeah.
So I mean, I
and
think when you do
following.
good work and it's out there, and so, like then I go and follow. Like it's nice that posts a new artist almost every day, and I'm like, whoa, that's nice. Or like the New Yorker posts like somebody there illustrating, and I see an illustrator there, and I start following them. Or somebody else does a panel, and you see somebody on there, and you're like, I wonder what they do. And then I mean, I think it's just like as much getting yourself involved in as many things as you do. I think that's what gets you the followers.
What about hashtags?
Hashtags is nothing. Please don't do the paragraph of hashtags.
So people follow me on Instagram. They shouldn't. They should follow Windham Fabrics because if they follow me, they just see a lot of fishing pictures. But when I see a designer starting to follow me, I will check them out. So that's a good way to get to the right people, if you will, by following them. Don't follow Windham. You can follow me. You'll see fishing pictures.
Go ahead.
I guess kind of circling back to something someone was talking about earlier, you're all really unique and have your own unique work, and I feel like something I feel kind of lost on is like finding the niche of the market that I would fit into. Like I make something and I'm like, this seems cool to me, but like, is this commercially viable? And it sounds like some of you just, your market found you, but if you're not counting on that and you're not going to go to grad school, like, how can you find like what part of the market your work fits into? Does that make sense?
what do you want to do? Like, I think you gotta think like, what do I really want to do? What makes me happy? What do I want to see myself doing? And you figure that out, and then you figure out the entryway to do that thing. So it's like, I mean, it sounds like you just don't know what you want to do, maybe. Does she?
I don't know. I mean, I would say that it's hard to trust that what you're doing is enough for yourself. One of the things I like to think about what our job is to fill the niche for the banker that's not doing the drawing. They're doing your banking for you. And have you ever been in a gallery or in an art environment like this and you're just like gutted by something? You're like, I have to have that. It's because that person figured something out for you that you didn't even maybe necessarily know that you needed to figure out. And I often acquire or buy things because I need to sit with that. I need to look at that. I need to study it. I need to drink out of it. I need to see how they did that and answer the questions that they've already figured out and figure out how to absorb that or borrow it for my own thing. But I think that for our job is to make the things that people aren't able to express in the world visually because they're doing our tailoring or they're going to respond to that product at H&M or at Bando because you've done something for them that's fun and makes you feel happy. So if you're making work that satisfies some aspect of joy or answers some question or hard thing that you're working on and you put it out there, your niche might be really niche, but it might also be a lot less niche than you think. And I think you just have to trust that whatever it is that you're doing is okay, and that if you put it out there, your people will find you, and you will find them.
Yay! Very good. Do we have to wrap up at any point? Because I feel like are you guys tired?
Yes. Any more questions?
Are there more questions? Where do you want to go?
I have a question.
Wait, you already went and there's somebody behind you.
Sorry, this is going to take a really quick second, but I actually work as a social media manager currently, and in the past have worked on projects where I've had to find artist influencers. So that project entailed two asks. One was an influencer, so-called influencer, who needed to create a mural for a client that I was working with, and the other was sourcing influencers who would post on behalf of our brand. So the easiest way, I think, maybe this is helpful, I don't know, but the easiest way I was able to find, like, from a world of millions of artists to that list of 20 for me was, one, that artist having a very robust bio on Instagram. So at least having the key pieces of information, like where you're located, the kind of work that you do, your most recent client work. That is very important, I think, for me when I'm looking for influencers like that. That's how I found the muralist that I worked with. And the other piece of that, I do look at following, I do look at the grid, which is the Instagram feed. But to me, what the most important things are is being able to contact you and be able to look at things like sites and external things digitally. So that's one piece, and the other piece is there are programs, and I'm sorry I can't recall them right now, but they're opt-in programs where there are influencer databases, and you can opt in and live on those kind of like databases where people like me will be looking for people like you, and they can easily search you through these databases. And
like FOHR?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So that's an easy way to be discoverable. FOHR.
I was just like, what?
Yeah. And that's how I was able to find the short list of influencers. So, yeah, I mean, that's only one experience, but I'm sure there's more.
Thank you.
Thanks.
New information.
So I could add to that. So oftentimes when I do discover something that I'm interested in, whether it's through Instagram or otherwise, I will go to their website or see if there is a website afterwards for more specific information about the designer, how to contact the designer, what else they might be doing outside or with their art. So website does count for something.
Are you looking at the portfolio on the website? Or are you looking more at Instagram for the portfolio?
The body of work is usually informed by Instagram, but more specific, for example, contact information or what else they might be doing outside of the work that they're posting on Instagram, I could often find on a website.
Are you expecting to see, like, I see some artists do the traditional, like, CV of everything they've ever done and, like, about me page. Like, are you looking at all of that as well? Or do you, like, how detailed should somebody be? Like, because I'm coming from somewhere of a career change, and I feel like I see all these service designers and illustrators with these really badass, like, fine art backgrounds. So coming from, I went from communications to product design, so I just kind of stumbled my way into it. So I don't have the, like, MFA and all that. I just wondered how important is that in when you're looking at an artist?
For me, it's not important. What's important to me is there something there that I think we could use that will resonate with what we do. So whether you have a fine arts degree or a degree in investment banking and then you became an artist is irrelevant to me.
I totally forgot to say this in the beginning. You all got a raffle ticket because it's a portfolio review. You're gonna win a portfolio review if you want one. With all of us? No, Jennifer and I said we would do it, but if anyone else wants to help, that'd be great too. Online, not now,
right?
Not now, but like in a FaceTime for a half hour, giving advice.
I want a portfolio review.
Okay, if you don't want it, then, I guess I gotta read it, look at your number, this is like old school bingo, here we go. 9, 7, 1, 4, 8, 0. You got it, winner. Okay, so, come up here later, if you want it, come up here and we'll take your info and talk to you personally about your work for however long time. I think we should wrap up because it's getting late here and if you have any other questions, we'll be here for 5 more minutes.
I just want to say thank you to all of you. I think this was an amazing evening and I hope you all enjoyed it and thank you for spending your time. And I do want to just say one thing to my FIT MFA students, that Maria Carluccio graduated from the FIT MFA program. So.
And I'm sorry, I blanked on her name first.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so there you go. It's inspiration for you.